He didn't look like a boss, not with that weathered coat and cracked phone. That's why they let their true colors show. Every sneer, every slur, every act of quiet cruelty. They thought he was just another customer, but he wasn't there to eat. He was there to see, to watch what happened when no one thought they were being watched. By the time they realized who he really was, it was too late. The cameras were rolling, the evidence was live, and their laughter would become the lesson of a lifetime. Ethan Cross had spent his life building something from nothing. What began as a small roadside cafe with his mother's handwritten recipes had grown into a chain known for comfort food and family warmth. To him, every cup of coffee poured in those kitchens was supposed to mean respect, a reminder of the dignity his mother gave to everyone who sat at her tables. But lately that vision had started to crumble. Whispers had reached his desk, stories of rude staff, unfair treatment, and customers leaving in tears. Reports were vague, polished to hide the ugliness underneath, but the pattern was unmistakable. Discrimination, quiet and persistent, was bleeding through the very foundation of what he'd built. His managers dismissed the claims. Overreactions, they said, but Ethan knew better. So he made a decision. No cameras, no corporate entourage, just him, an old jacket, worn shoes, and a quiet resolve to see the truth for himself. He chose a diner that had once meant everything to his family, the first one his mother had ever dreamed of opening. The morning he stepped through those doors, the air shifted. Conversations faltered. Eyes measured him, judged him, decided what kind of man he was before he even spoke. He could feel the weight of every stare, the silent sorting of who belonged and who didn't. He took a seat by the window, unnoticed by the world that thought it already knew his story. But this time Ethan wasn't there for coffee. He was there to uncover what had become of his mother's dream, and who had turned it into a place where kindness no longer lived. The diner buzzed with the sound of clinking cups and low chatter, the kind of everyday noise that made injustice easier to hide. Ethan Cross sat quietly near the window, hands wrapped around an empty cup waiting to be noticed. But no one came. Servers passed his table twice, smiling warmly at others while pretending not to see him. Minutes stretched into 20. When a young waitress finally approached, her expression carried something between irritation and disbelief, like she couldn't understand why he hadn't already left. Her name tag read Vivian. "Coffee," he said softly, his voice calm but firm. She sighed, scribbled something on her pad, and walked off without a word. Across the room, the floor manager leaned against the counter, watching. His smirk said everything. He whispered something to a coworker and laughter followed. Low at first, then louder, sharper. The air thickened. Ethan glanced around. He wasn't just being ignored. He was being made into a spectacle. A couple by the window looked at him, then turned away. No one spoke up. Silence. That familiar accomplice filled the room. When the coffee finally came, it was cold. The cup trembled slightly in his hand, not from weakness, but from restraint. He took a sip anyway. The bitterness coated his tongue like rust. He asked quietly if it could be replaced. Vivian's laugh was short, mocking. "What do you expect for cheap prices?" she muttered, loud enough for the others to hear. The manager, Jack, sauntered over, puffed up with authority. "Problem here?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Ethan met his eyes. "Just wondering if you serve everyone like this." That was all it took. Jax's smirk widened into something cruel. "People like you should be grateful we serve you at all," he said. The words landed like a slap, not just to Ethan, but to the room itself. A few customers shifted uncomfortably. No one intervened. Ethan placed the cup down carefully. He could feel every eye on him now. Every heartbeat in that diner echoed between anger and disbelief. He took out his phone, its cracked screen reflecting the fluorescent lights, and typed a short message. Phase 1 complete. Vivian noticed and frowned. "What are you doing?" she snapped. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Jax leaned closer. "You think you're smart, huh? Taking pictures, trying to cause trouble? Maybe it's time you left before we call someone to help you out." For a brief moment, Ethan's gaze fell on the wall near the counter, a photo of his mother smiling beside the grand opening banner of that very diner. Beneath it, a quote she'd written years ago. "A meal should feed more than the stomach. It should feed the soul." How far this place had fallen. Jax followed his gaze. "Yeah, the old lady who started this joint," he said mockingly. "Guess she had her favorites too." The words burned, but Ethan stayed silent. He stood slowly, placing a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change," he said, his voice low, almost calm. Vivian crossed her arms. "You can't afford charity," she sneered. As Ethan turned toward the door, his reflection caught the glass, the face of a man not broken, but calculating. Outside, the sunlight hit the sign that bore his mother's name, now cracked and faded. He knew this wasn't just about a meal. It was about a sickness that had spread into something sacred, and for the first time, he allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Because what came next would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone watching. The next morning, the diner looked the same. Same chatter, same smell of burnt toast, same laughter from those who thought cruelty was just part of the menu. But this time, the man walking through the door wasn't just a quiet customer. Ethan Cross arrived in a crisp navy suit, his calm confidence cutting through the noise like a blade. The staff froze for a second, recognizing him, then smirked again, assuming he'd come back to complain. "Didn't think we'd see you again," Jax muttered, crossing his arms. "You forget something yesterday?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Actually, I came to return something. My mother's legacy." Confusion flickered across Jax's face. Before he could speak, two corporate representatives entered behind Ethan, clipboards in hand. The diner went silent. Ethan stepped forward, voice steady but sharp enough to cut through years of ignorance. "You see, my name isn't just Ethan Cross, it's Ethan Crosswell. My family owns this chain, including this location. Yesterday I came here undercover to see how things were being run." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian's smirk vanished. Jax blinked, then stammered. You're the owner? Your regional manager will confirm it," Ethan said calmly, handing over a document stamped with his company seal. "And the cameras you didn't notice? They've already confirmed everything you said and did." The representatives began taking notes, their eyes cold and professional. Ethan's tone hardened. "You humiliated me in front of customers. Not because I was wrong, but because of what I looked like. You thought you could treat people like dirt and get away with it. But this place was built by a woman who believed in dignity. My mother. You disrespected her name the moment you disrespected me." Vivian stepped back, trembling. "It was just a joke." "Racism isn't a joke," Ethan cut in. His words landed like thunder. "It's the reason good people walk away from places that should feel safe." The room felt smaller, heavier. Even the customers who'd watched quietly yesterday now stared, shame burning in their faces. Ethan looked around one last time. "You wanted to laugh yesterday? Go ahead. But today, the cameras are still rolling, and the whole company is about to see what kind of people you really are." The sound of a chair scraping broke the silence. Jax's bravado crumbled as corporate handed him a termination notice. Vivian's hands shook as she tried to speak, but no words came. Ethan turned toward the window, sunlight hitting the photo of his mother again. The same quote hung beneath it, now clearer than ever. He whispered softly, "Feed the soul, not the hate." And then, without another word, he walked out, but this time, everyone was watching. For weeks after that day, the diner became the center of attention. The story spread fast. A business owner going undercover, exposing racism within his own company. News outlets ran headlines. Social media exploded with outrage and disbelief. But for Ethan Cross, it wasn't about publicity. It was about truth. He didn't rebuild the diner overnight. He didn't fire everyone in anger either. Instead, he rebuilt the culture. Mandatory empathy training replaced casual cruelty. Management was restructured, and every wall and every branch was marked with a new slogan. The same words his mother once said when she served her very first customer. "Respect is the recipe." People started to notice the change. Customers returned, not just for the food, but for the feeling. The diners became safe spaces again, but Ethan knew something deeper. This story wasn't just about a few cruel workers. It was about what happens when prejudice goes unchecked, when silence becomes complicity. He had seen it himself, how a few hateful words can poison a place meant to bring people together. Late one evening, long after the last customer had left, Ethan sat by the same window where it all began. Outside, the streetlights glowed against the glass, casting the same reflection he saw that first morning. But this time, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't undercover. He was seen. He thought about every person who'd ever walked into a place and felt they didn't belong. Every quiet moment of humiliation that went unnoticed. Every time someone was told in words or in looks that they were less than. That was the real cost of racism. Not just lost jobs or damaged reputations, but stolen dignity. Ethan whispered to himself almost like a prayer. If one person walks in tomorrow and feels welcome because of what happened here, then it was worth it. Because that's what his mother had taught him. That the smallest act of respect can heal the deepest wounds. This story wasn't just about a diner. It was about every workplace, every classroom, every neighborhood still fighting the same silent battles. So the question remains, how many more Ethans will it take before we realize that equality isn't a slogan, it's a responsibility? Because sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to walk through its doors disguised as one of the forgotten and remind it what humanity really tastes like.